We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Sunday. Now, as you're listening to this, I'm off partying. We've got the birthday party for my granddaughter, Junie, here at our place in the party room. Both families are coming. It's going to be a big event. And my granddaughter is going to be freaking out. She's going to have a hard time understanding how all these people are there for her. She's going to have cake and ice cream and presents and all kinds of stuff. She's going to lose her shit. And, I think that's one of the most important things we can do as adults, whether we're grandparents or parents. And I knew this when I had my kids. It's important that we do things for them that will give them memories, fond memories of their childhood. Too many kids go through life and they deal with some serious shit. It's immensely valuable to be able to look back to your childhood and have fond memories. As much as I had some difficulties with my father, I do have many fond memories from my childhood, and I appreciate them immensely. And as long as I'm alive, I'm going to make sure my grandchildren have those same kind of fond memories. Anyway, we're doing that. That's fun. But before I get to that, I got to do this, the Rational Boomer podcast. It's funny about the Rational Boomer podcast. When I originally sat down to do this way back when, I thought, okay, I got to fill up an hour, hour and a half's worth of time, and I've got to talk, and I've got to talk about this. And the mindset was really different than what it is now. And actually, where I've gotten to now is exactly what I wanted in the beginning. I wanted this to be more like a radio show. You sit down and talk, not so uniformed. We just talk and we talk about some of the stuff that's important of the day in terms of politics and news. Maybe get to know one another as we do this, with me saying whatever and me reading your emails. And it's really kind of developed to that point. So I'm grateful for that. This has become my mindset is more like a radio show. You sit down and you do the show, you put in your time, you try to make it entertaining and informative and not fucked up. And that's what I do every day. And people say, well, how could you do a podcast every day? Well, it's because I approach it like a radio show. You'd have to do a radio show every day, and you don't script everything out. You don't make it so tight that you have to uh, rehearse it or anything like that. It's basically sitting down, take a look at what's going on today, and react to what's happening and the emails and such. And I feel glad that we've been able to develop to this point and make it kind of a radio show. The other part of this is it's like a radio show, but it's dissimilar to a radio show in that I have no restrictions. I have no time restrictions. I have nobody telling me don't talk about this, promote that. That made that whole process of doing a radio show less fun. So now I've got that flexibility. I can do a radio show as I would normally do a radio show, except it's not a radio show, it's a podcast. And here we are. And the fact that I can do this now doesn't have anything to do with my abilities. It has to do with you folks actually coming and listening every day. Without you doing that, there's really no point in me doing this. So this is kind of a team effort, and I appreciate your part in it. You play a big part in it, and that's why I think it's so important that you participate through emails or being on the show. Just a reminder, if you don't know this, I don't say this a lot because I get a lot of emails, but I think I should. Um, if you want to send an email in, and I encourage you to do that, just send it to rationalboomer@gmail.com, rationalboomer@gmail.com. Now, if you want to be on the show, if you want to be a guest on the show, you can do that too. And same thing, you just send an email to rationalboomer@gmail.com. Tell me you want to be on. We'll work out a time frame and we'll just fucking do it. And again, there's no rehearsing, there's no scripts or anything like that. We have some topics we want to talk about. Then you and I just talk. Simple as that. There's some people that have been on the show. I'm trying to think of some. Christy, Ilona was on. If you folks want to come back, we've had some great guests, and we're always looking forward to another guest on the program. So that's always fun, and we hope you go to rationalboomer@gmail.com and talk to me about being on the show as well. All right. We've got some emails, as you've become accustomed to. First one comes from Oliver. Oliver says, "Hi, Mike. Mr. Magoo looking Bill Barr has no fucking dignity or self respect. That piece of shit." I like how you're thinking, Oliver. He has the nerve to say that Biden is the real threat to democracy and not Trump, even with his 90 plus indictments and knowing about the election lies and trying to overthrow the election. What a fucking loser. We need to vote all Republicans out of the local and state levels all the way to the presidency. I'm convinced they are all crazy and are ruining this country. That's the interesting thing about Bill Barr. We all heard the story that after all the shit he's gone through, all the things he's said about Donald Trump since leaving the attorney general's job, then he comes out and says, "Yeah, but I'll vote for Donald Trump if he is the candidate." And people are surprised by that. And you shouldn't be surprised by that. These are Trumplafucks. They don't do what's right. They don't do what's good for this country. They only do what is good for them or their Lord and Savior, Donald Trump. And for them to come out and stand with him after all that's uh, gone by us over the last 7 years, it's really not surprising. You know what is surprising? What is surprising that Bill Barr hasn't been indicted yet. Now, people have come to me and said, "What should he be indicted for?" Well, if nothing else, accessory to a fucking criminal president. I mean, you remember how he downplayed the Mueller report. He misinformed the public for the benefit of Donald Trump and himself. Now, I don't know if that's illegal, but it sure is fucked up. Might he have had some hands in the January 6th thing? I don't know. Bill Barr is not an honest or decent person. I can't tell you what he would be charged with, but I'll guarantee you this. If there is something he could be charged with, Jack Smith has figured it out. And people will say, "Well, why haven't they done it?" And I think the information we've gotten about this is, whether we like it or not, it sounds like Jack Smith has some intentions of indicting sitting members of Congress, maybe Ginny Thomas and all that stuff. But apparently he wants to wait till after the election. And I understand that. It's frustrating. It's disappointing. We want it now. But I understand why he would want to do that. He wants to focus on Donald Trump and get that motherfucking thing done. And then after the election, everything kind of calms down because we'll have Democrats in power and nobody pushing back. I understand that. And that's one of the things you have to understand when we're dealing with these things. People complained all the time. Why isn't Donald Trump in jail yet? Well, he's in his first criminal trial. Let's get the trial done and then talk about whether he's in jail or not. Some people look at it as this is only a win if Donald Trump is handcuffed and put in jail. Now, don't get me wrong. That's something I would like to see, but it doesn't have to go to that extent to be a win. At this stage of the game, leading up to the November election, what we need to do is get Donald Trump out of the mix, out of the narrative, whether he breaks down emotionally, physically, or the Republicans kick him out or he's in jail. I don't care what it is, just so he's out of the mix. Now, I've said I don't know that he's going to be the nominee because of all this shit hanging over him. But as I've also said, I hope he is the nominee because he will get absolutely destroyed. Every election since 2016 or after 2016 that's had Donald Trump's face or name tied to it has been a loser for the Republicans. History would tell us that Donald Trump is not going to do well in November. And then you throw in all these other things, little things like overturning Roe v. Wade and embracing it and taking full credit for it. You really think he has a chance in November? So we'll see all of what happens. People have asked me, "Do you really think Donald Trump will be in jail?" Yeah, I do. There was a time when I didn't think that was possible, but I didn't know what I didn't know back then. I mean, the magnitude The magnitude of the charges that are against him are absolutely fucking crazy. To date, or at least in this era, he's got to be the most prolific criminal in a long, long time. How many people have 91 or 88 criminal charges, felony charges against them? Even the worst criminals don't have that many felonies. It's fucking crazy. And the idea that he's not going to get convicted, now that's stupid. As I've said before, some people are worried about this stuff being pushed out after the election. I don't really worry about that because we have one trial going on now. There are 34 felony charges. He will most certainly get convicted. And then when the other trials come up after the election, that's just as well because he won't be protected. The Republicans won't give two fucks about him. He won't be running for the presidency, and he certainly won't be the president. So he'll be standing there naked. And I know that's a horrible picture to give, but he'll figuratively, he'll be standing there naked with no protection. And that will be the finishing point. But get him out of the narrative. Not so much not being the nominee, but take his voice away from him. As long as he has the ability to talk, that's what causes the chaos and the problems in this country. We've got to take his voice away from him, and we've got to take people or change people's minds as to listening to him and believing him, because he is a cancer in this country. All right, the next email says, "Hi, Boomer. My vehicles are between 20 and 60 years old, so I don't have Sirius Radio or Howard Stern. But I used to have company cars and listened to him then. I'm not a fan of purposeless raunchiness and sometimes would turn him off. I also was put off by the apparent lack of wealth sharing with his employees. But there's no doubt he's a brilliant guy, and his skills as an interviewer have become legendary. Many of his interviews, and I'll offer Hillary Clinton and Bruce Springsteen as examples, are considered some of the best ever done. He's also hysterical, and these days only a small portion of his content and humor is the hijinks and silly sexual stuff you remember. Howard is a really insightful and interesting cat. His network amongst celebrities and athletes is huge, maybe bigger than anyone's. He's very integrated with and accepted in the mainstream celebrity culture. In other words, he has credibility, and with his fames, it's Taylor Swift-like in terms of his ability to influence them. So that's great that Biden went there. And here's to Howard for wearing a suit and tie. I like that he did that. Best Garage Door Jeff." Of course, there's a PSA. It says, "As an old Minnesota guy, did you listen to Prairie Home Companion? I'm going to guess no based on your personality. And yes, I was one of those nuts glued to my radio every Saturday night through the 80s and 90s. Howard Stern was in this market only for a short time. I did watch his TV shows, and, I was younger at the time, so I was into all that raunchy, crazy, goofy shit that was for shock value. Now, the Prairie Home Companion, that was kind of a famous thing in this town. It was very popular. And you're right, I didn't listen to it. It just wasn't of my taste. And I will tell you this, having met Garrison Keillor and know people that knew Garrison Keillor, he was a complete asshole, an arrogant piece of shit. And just based on that, I wouldn't listen to him. I know it was a great show. I know a lot of people that were on the show, people I work with later. So I appreciate the quality and the popularity of the show, but I mean, I did listen to it once or twice here and there, but I wasn't a regular listener. And you're right, with my personality, it just doesn't fucking fit, especially when I'm in my 20s and 30s. I was pretty much the same guy, but I wasn't quite as evolved back in my 20s and 30s. And of course, we're talking 80s and 90s. That was a completely different era. You can't take what's going on now and compare it to the 80s, 90s, or even the 70s. It was a fucking completely different world. So thank you, Garage Door Jeff. I I appreciate that. All right. The next email says, Mike, I discovered your podcast several months ago, and I've been an avid listener ever since. Great job you do. And I know just how difficult it is to do this on a reoccurring basis. Hard work for someone your age. Well, thank you for that. I'm 64. It's really not that hard of work. I specialize, whenever it comes to anything, I specialize in trying to find the easiest way to do it. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to, um, I don't want to be forced to do anything. I don't want to do something I don't want to do. I'm at an age where I don't have to do that anymore. So actually doing these hours podcasts really don't take much. I'll tell you what it involves. I pull together all the emails. That just takes a short time. I copy and paste from my email. I go through the list of stories and I take down like the titles and the first line of the story and I put that up. And then I come down to the time when we started off, hit the button and start talking. That's the extent of my preparation on these shows. I don't spend a lot of time doing it. People always say to me, God, you must spend all day doing TikToks and podcasts. I don't. I did five TikToks this morning. I did them in about an hour and 20 minutes. And then I was off with my wife shopping for the party today. Doing the podcast, I sit down, say 11 o'clock. I put in about an hour and a half putting it together and putting it up, and then I'm done. So I don't spend a lot of time, and it's not really hard work, even at my age. Emailer goes on to say, I'm a bit older at 68, retired, and working part time as a courier. It keeps me grounded and busy. Yeah, you got to keep doing something. You got to keep your mind working. What I've come to realize with your podcast is that it's like old AM radio, which I grew up with. I listen to your podcast every morning, and I appreciate it that you release the night before. I never thought about that, but it does seem kind of like old AM radio. And like you, I was a huge fan when I was a little kid, my low teens, 12, 13. I loved call in talk radio. I don't know why I loved it. And you got to understand that I worked in AM radio from in the 80s for the most part. So I come by it honestly. I remember listening and being part of AM radio. I was a producer of call-in talk shows and that stuff. So that's a good observation. I never thought about it, but you're absolutely right. The email goes on to say, I've got some other trusted podcasts I listen to, included Pod Save America, The Political Gab Fest, Breaking Points with Crystal and Sager, Fast Politics with Molly Jong Fast, Legal AF, Pod Save the World, the Josh Marshall podcast, among others. As for TV, I watch NBC News, CNN, MSNBC, some Fox, just keep up with what the right is thinking and doing, Al Jazeera and BBC, to see what and how the foreign press is reporting. It's funny. People ask me that. What podcasts do you listen to? I don't. If I'm on a plane, I might listen to something entertaining like Mark Maron or Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey and um, the other guy. Fuck, anyway, that's the kind of shit I listen to when I'm on a plane, when I got nothing else I can do. I don't listen to podcast. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I can't really stay focused on the long form if I'm trying to put together TikToks and a podcast. I need quick information and then I need to pick out those things I like and then I'll dig into it in any way I can. I'll look at blogs, I'll look at news reports and that sort of thing. So I don't listen to those podcasts and I'm kind of glad I don't. I don't want to try to compare what I'm doing to other podcasts because I don't think there's any comparison. I'm not suggesting mine is better. I'm just saying I don't want to do it like everybody else does. I want to do what I want to do, see what fucking happens. Anyway, the email continues and says, keep up the great work, and I hope you're doing well financially from this. Such a great podcast deserves not only an audience, but recompense as well. Mike, another boomer and fan. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I make a few bucks, but not a lot. And that's not really important. That's not why I do it. I get gratification from the effects and the people who listen and participate. Yeah, there's a few dollars there. And as it gets bigger, maybe more. But I got to be real careful about how much money I make. I can't make that much money. I'm on Social Security. I start making too much motherfucking money, and they start taking your Social Security away. I'm not getting rid of that free money. I know what you're going to say. Well, it's not free money. You earned it. You put your money in. Right now, it seems like free money. I understand what the whole background of it is and how it affects things, but um, yeah, no, I'm not getting rich off of it. All right, the next email says, "Hi, Mike. I think Biden campaign's anti-Trump narrative is a winning one. Running on that narrative is a slam dunk. However, I also think that the narrative is changing very quickly to Gaza and Zionist narrative. Agree or disagree? If this narrative sticks around through the summer, and I see no evidence of those things cooling down anytime soon, I have to believe he's in real trouble and very well may lose the election. That's what my feelers tell me. Your thoughts?" Joshua. Yeah, well, I disagree with you there. I think a lot of stuff that's out there that's working against Donald Trump is stuff that the Republicans put out into the narrative to try to create this image. Now, make no mistake, there is no question that there are people upset about Joe Biden's stance on Israel. I don't know what more he can do, honestly. I don't know more what I don't know what he can do. He's trying to support Israel, which he must do because they are an ally, but at the same time, he's trying to mediate this thing and try to stop this war, try to negotiate that out. And it sounds like they may be getting some progress with that. And he's also trying to get humanitarian aid, which he did, to the people in the Gaza Strip. He's not the president of Israel. Remember, Benjamin Netanyahu is, and he's basically a miniature, I won't even say miniature, he's a clone of Donald Trump. And therein lies the real problem we have with the Israel Hamas war. All right, the next email. "Hello, Mike. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for always being the voice of logic and reason when the shit hits the fan. Did you see when Little Man Johnson addressing American students? The line that really pissed me off was, 'Don't waste your parents' money.' I saw red after Little Man Johnson spoke. The police started getting aggressive with the students. The police were shooting rubber bullets at the students. Peaceful protesting in USC did nothing. They did not have the students' safety in their mind. No, they didn't. They did not. And when there is some violence in these things, we talked about it with Old Soul. A lot of times it's these redneck motherfuckers that infiltrate this thing and start whipping up some violence and stuff. These kids aren't looking for violence. As I said, I'm rather proud of these kids because we saw this in the '60s. Um, Kids standing up, speaking their minds, and pushing back because they held the keys to the future. And I wasn't sure we were going to see that out of Gen Z or the millennials, but we are. And I think that's good news. I think kids speaking up and protesting is exactly what we need in this country. There's been too much apathy for far too long. And when I'm gone, I hope we don't fall back into an apathetic state. So that is good. The police coming out and doing the things they did, yeah, I have a trouble with that. I mean, we should look at history before we repeat history. Most of you, I won't even say most of you, a lot of you remember Kent State, and that was a fucked up situation. Some people are saying, send out the National Guard. Well, we did that one time, and some kids ended up dead unnecessarily. Hopefully, we can get a handle on this thing. Hopefully, Joe Biden can mediate some kind of peace and get this behind us. Um, when I said that Republicans like to throw things in the narrative to make it difficult for Joe Biden, they can't beat him on policy. So they've got to try to stain him. And I honestly think this whole thing with Israel and Hamas originates from Russia, who has everything to gain by messing with the election. We already know they did it in 2016, 2020, and they're certainly doing it in 2024. And when I say messing with the election, I mean making things chaotic, causing problems for Joe Biden. Now, that might sound like a stretch, and I've told you before, We've got Hamas attacking Israel. Nobody expected that. They weren't expected to have the success they did, but they were supported by Iran. Iran is supported by Russia. Donald Trump fed Israeli military information, classified information to Russia. It seems like a long daisy chain, but it sounds very suspicious, don't you think? All right, the email continues. Criminal rapist, traitor, tax evading, diaper wearing Trump and the Republicans have destroyed America and our credibility with the world. We cannot demand freedom for other people when we don't have it ourselves. I cannot wait for the elections. Every single one of these motherfuckers will be voted out and held accountable for their actions. Lock them all up. The Supreme Court is an embarrassment. They need to be removed or replaced. Another reason the Republicans will rot in hell. Have a fantastic week, Deborah. The only thing I will argue with you there, Deborah, is you said Republicans have destroyed America like they've finished the job. They have not. It's bad. We're on that road, but I don't think America's destroyed yet. There is room and opportunity to come back, and we will. I firmly believe that after the November election. So while they're in destruction mode with regards to this country, we are not yet fully destroyed. So hold on a second. All right, the next one says a few years ago, I caught Howard Stern on the Anderson Cooper show. He said the shock jock thing he was doing just wasn't working for him anymore. Maybe the world isn't as easy to shock. I don't know. He surprised a lot of people that day. He's been doing all sorts of serious interviews since. He has fun, but he's changed his image and his show, which seems to, and that comes from Grandma Patty. And, frankly, uh, that should be a natural progression. He's in his late 60s now. It's time to make a change. People know him, people love him. That's the thing when somebody's on radio. Somebody new to the business will go on and say, I want to do this, and then I want to do this. The one thing you have to do whenever you do a radio show, you have to build a rapport, a relationship with the audience. They got to know who you are. You can't just throw shit at them and they don't understand who you are or why you're doing it. Once you build that rapport and that relationship, you can branch out into other things. I mean, I'm able to do that on this show now because people know who I am and they expect certain things. And then I can go off and branch off in other things. When I first started the show, I couldn't do that because they only knew what they knew from TikTok. So with his success, he's gotten more freedom and his ability to try other things. And of course, his audience has aged too and matured. So they're more willing to accept those things. And I'm glad to see it. I mean, I have a lot of, as much as there were times I didn't like Howard Stern and I did like Howard Stern, I have a lot of respect for all the things he's accomplished in radio. It's truly amazing what he's done. All right. The next email says, Hi, Boomer. I'm not sure that I've said this the best way possible, but here goes. Feel free to ad lib. Here's the reality. SCOTUS knows that if Biden or Trump gets immunity or reelected, their goose is cooked either way. They also know that Trump is not to be trusted. Therefore, if they grant him immunity, it gives Trump power of the land if he becomes president. Presidential immunity eliminates SCOTUS as the ultimate power. They've seen Trump turn on other loyal Labradors unto him. They won't give up their power to Trump. Either way, they can't win in this decision. Whoever they grant immunity to will render them powerless. I do see them running the clock for Trump because they definitely prefer him over Biden. If they can help him win the election and keep their ultimate power, they will have fulfilled their lackey loyalty to their Lord and Savior. Immunity will be just as big a problem for SCOTUS as it will be for the rest of the country. Couldn't agree more. They're not going to give him immunity. All these people on TV saying, I don't know, it could happen. It could. That's bullshit. That's not going to happen. It just makes no fucking sense at all. Second thing is Donald Trump can't win the election. And one of the main reasons he can't win the election is because of the Supreme Court and their fucked up conservative edge. By overturning Roe v. Wade, they pretty much um, sent it down the toilet for the Republicans. The Republicans continue to wrap themselves in this overturning Roe v. Wade. They're so proud. Donald Trump says he's responsible for it. And the Democrats are taking advantage and using that information to beat them in November. Like I've said, there's a lot of reasons why the Republicans and specifically Donald Trump cannot win. But overturning Roe v. Wade is the big one. It is the big one. Supreme Court did that. Donald Trump did that. The Republicans did that. And women don't forget. And the men that support women don't forget. This is a big deal. This is about the health and welfare and the very lives of women. And if you think people are going to forget about it or give you a pass on it, you're sadly motherfucking mistaken. All right. She finishes up by saying if Trump were to worm his way into office, his dictatorship will ruin it for them regardless. Win for Biden will have the same effect, toast for their position. Think about it. Like a squirrel in the middle of the road with an oncoming car, they don't know which way to run. They just can't win. They don't care about anybody else any more than Trump does. They're Trump's alter ego. Mary, Biden or bust, vote blue wave. I tend to agree with you. And I think that's the case with the Republicans in general. They've all done this. They rode this pony too motherfucking far. They've ridden it too far. And now they don't know how to get out of it. They should have got out of it the moment Donald Trump left the White House. They should have let it go, let it simmer, and let him fade away. But they just couldn't do it. Kevin McCarthy had to go down there, kiss his diapered ass, and bring him back into the fold. And for that, they are going to pay dearly. They're currently paying dearly. So Supreme Court's in the same position. I don't know how they fuck up this bad, but they certainly did. And you're right, they can't win either way they go. The Supreme Court is a problem. Without a credible Supreme Court, we can't have a democracy. So when Joe Biden becomes president, something must be done with the Supreme Court. Even if they found, or the Democrats henceforth, there's still a big problem. Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barry. They're all problems. We've got people in the Supreme Court that aren't even qualified to be there. At the very least, they should be kicked out. Now, somebody made an interesting observation, and I hadn't thought about this, and it's conceivable. What they suggested was that a bill be passed, and obviously you can't probably do this until after the election, a bill be passed that any president that's been convicted of a crime, their choices or their appointees for the Supreme Court should be nullified and kicked out. And that makes some sense. I mean, if you've got a guy convicted of crimes while in office, they should get rid of the appointments that he made. I don't know if anybody seriously is thinking about that, but I could get on board with that. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right. This next email comes from an international listener. Always love to hear from people overseas. It's great to get the perspective of another country watching the shit show that we have going on here. Starts out with Dear Mike, I've been watching your TikToks and listening to your podcast for quite a while now, and you always make me smile. The way you put things into perspective with clear language using common sense, rationale, and critical thinking, and a balanced dose of sarcasm and humor. And I like that you stimulate people to use their brain, observe what's happening, rationalize information, and connect the dots. It's not really rocket science after all. No, it's not. It's about not getting too caught up in your emotions and getting scared. That's when people start thinking more abstract. If you can just focus down to the facts and such. The other thing I want to say too is, I get these emails and I appreciate the compliments you give me in these emails. Um, but it's kind of weird. I read these emails and I get all these compliments and I'm reading these compliments about myself. It's not that I'm trying to be humble here. That's not really what I am, but I appreciate it. I'll just say this. I appreciate it when you say those things, but you don't have to do it because uh, I'm already reading your email. I read everybody's email, so you don't have to do it. Now, the emailer goes on to say, in today's episode, you made some arguments about Gen X and Gen Z voting in November and the importance of Biden's stance on Israel and the undoing of overturning Roe v. Wade. Here's my point of view. The young people do really care about Roe v. Wade, no arguing there. But in most people's perspective, it only gets really important once you get or a close person gets into a situation that calls for medical procedures that are now out of reach during the overturning of Roe v. Wade by the Republicans. Naively enough, most people think that's not going to happen to me. So the number of people in this particular group of youngsters to whom it really matters now is not that big. Disagree. Anyway, also, a very large part of that group is worrying about their education, starting or boosting their career, working their asses off to make ends meet, and not actively busy with the idea of having children and the problems that might occur during a pregnancy. If, like you stated, the matter of Roe v. Wade is more important to them than the Biden stance on Israel, why are they now not out on the street or campuses protesting for undoing returning of Roe v. Wade? Well, there are some protests over this. I mean, there's a lot of protests over this. It's just not as sexy as what's going on the campuses. And you throw in the fact that we've got these Trumplafucks infiltrating these situations on the campuses and turning them into a mess. Here's the thing with Roe v. Wade. The Republicans have done a good job of just making it a black and white situation. You're either for abortion or you're against abortion. But by having Old Soul on the program, you're hearing there's more to it. There's more behind the scenes. There's actual women, not just not getting a choice or having a constitutional right taken away from them. They are suffering. They are struggling. They are putting their lives at risk. I think you'll find the Democrats talking more about Roe v. Wade and the true issues of what's going on here. What you have to understand is that to suggest that there's more people pushing back about Israel than there are Roe v. Wade being overturned, I don't think that's true. I don't think you hear about it as much, but recently there was another abortion issue that was in front of the Supreme Court last week, I think. And there was a pretty big protest outside the Supreme Court just before that happened. I think the problem here is the reporting, is the media, and that's always the problem. Uh, we're talking about apples and oranges here, but I disagree that there's not a strong pushback with abortion. Here's the one thing you don't see with regards to Israel. You don't see the commercials over and over again from the Democratic Party about the Israeli thing. You see, the thing about it is you have to look at the source of all this and how this is being handled and how the narrative is being expressed. The whole Israeli thing, Israeli Hamas thing, and Joe Biden's tie to it is really a benefit to the Republicans. That's trying to hurt Joe Biden. Roe v. Wade helps Joe Biden. So when you get these people throwing things into the narrative, they're going to go the way that's going to try to hurt Joe Biden. It's just a perception you're having to suggest that people aren't upset or protesting or complaining about overturning Roe v. Wade. That's just not true. And I understand you live in a different country, so you see things from a different perspective. Again, it's apples and oranges, but don't think people aren't upset. I mean, when Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, do you remember that? The streets of this country were filled with women that were upset because they knew what was to come. Make no mistake, people are just as invested in this Roe v. Wade thing and fighting against Donald Trump. All right. This brings me to the next point, the importance of Biden's stance on Israel. First of all, I believe we should say Biden's stance on Zionism. After all, not all people in Israel are supporting what is happening in Gaza. The reason why there are so many protests, not only in the US, but worldwide, is that, yes, me included, want an immediate ceasefire, not after the elections as possible result for a new administration. I agree. I agree with that. But again, the problem, as you said, is Zionism, more specifically, Benjamin Netanyahu. What really needs to be done is get that motherfucker forced out and put him on trial where he's supposed to be because he is an absolute criminal. The emailer goes on to say, I've been a fan of Biden and Harris, but when I learned about their unconditional support of Israel, read the Zionistic ultra right wing government in Israel, I was at least to say very disappointed. If I were a U.S. citizen and Biden and Harris would not sway very soon, I would abstain from voting. Voting for Trump is a definite no-go, but casting my vote for an administration that sends tens of billions of dollars and boatloads of bombs and ammunition to kill and injure mostly women and children is definitely a no-go. Well, I will tell you this, you're not a voter in this country. I heard Tom Powell talk about this on one of his TikToks. I'm mad at Biden, so I'm not going to vote for him. Of course, I won't vote for Donald Trump, but I won't vote for Biden and Harris because of this Israel thing. Understand something. If you would normally vote for Biden and Harris, but you won't because you're mad at this situation, that's the same as a vote for Donald Trump. So don't tell me you're above voting for Donald Trump if you're going to refuse to vote for the Democratic side. Here's what people have to understand in this country. You don't always get everything you want. You can't wait to vote for just those people that do everything you want. It's never going to fucking happen. I made this comparison before. You may not like Biden and Harris, but it's like this option. Do you want to get, you can get a sprained ankle or fucking Ebola. That's your choice. And you have to make the right choice. And instead of trying to get it all in one felled swoop in one election, because you're not going to get it here, Biden may not be the best choice for president by virtue of his age, but it's what we got. So your choice is Biden or Trump. And if you're intelligent, at least average or above intelligence, you'll vote for Biden. It may not be everything you want, but it gets you on the fucking road to where you want to be. Get Biden and Harris out of here. Get the fucking cancer out of here. Get Biden and Harris in and the cancer out, meaning Republicans. And then at that point, decide how you're going to fix it from there. It's much easier to fix things when you've got a Biden Harris in there than if you have a Trump. Trump wants to be a fucking dictator. If that's the case, he doesn't care what you think. If Biden and Harris are in, then we, the people, still have an option to have our input. Don't look at the big picture. You're not going to win that way. You've got to take it a step at a time, get the first, put the fucking fire out. And then let's worry about rebuilding. Now, this emailer goes on to say, we all know these youngsters spend a lot of time on TikTok where we can find and see the uncensored information about the ongoing atrocities in Gaza, and the U.S. government, just like many governments in Europe, don't want us to see this. That is the reason they try to find a way to either control or ban TikTok. Therefore, I believe that the conclusion that Republicans come up with false statements that Biden's stance on Israel might have an impact on the election is a little shortcoming. Yeah. A lot of people don't like his age. A lot of people don't like his stance on Israel. But is that going to cost him the election? I don't think so. I I just don't. I think the media and the Republicans hype this stuff up, and when it comes down to nut cutting time, as I say, they're going to vote for Biden because the alternative is fucking atrocious. And if you don't vote, then you're voting for Trump. So if you want that on your soul, if that's what you want for your kids and your grandkids, well, then you deserve what you get. Goes on to say, I really do believe that when a good man sees the majority of the people in so many countries, we're just like in the US, the representatives are not representing the vast majority of the people, but financial interest. Yeah, we've been saying that all along, and realized that his current stance is going to cost him a maybe dangerous number of votes. He might want to reconsider his options, a victory that could be achieved before the elections. Well, I think this will probably be ended before the election, but what do you propose he do? Again, he's not president of Israel. He's an We are an ally of Israel. We have a certain responsibility to do that. He's gone the step further with trying to get ceasefires, and he got a couple of them. He's trying to work out a way where we can get this thing ended. He's getting humanitarian aid to Gaza. I mean, if he was president of Israel, sure, he could say, yeah, let's stop this motherfucker. But when you got a crazy motherfucker running Israel, it's hard to do. We saw that for 4 years with Donald Trump. Why are you hanging that on Joe Biden? He can only do so much. He has only so much power. Lastly, you pose the situations as if it were an exclusive or situation. It's either one or both, but not both together. As I tried to argue above, both can be possible if we can make the first victory before the upcoming election. How do you propose to do that? Should we assassinate Benjamin Netanyahu? Because that's the fucking problem. Why not go for both victories? Well, let's talk about that. We're still in the works in the Israeli thing, but the Roe v. Wade thing, we've already lost that fight. We have to pull that from the ashes and fix it once they get in. That's the big difference. I really like to hear your take about my theory. Wishing you and your family a lovely weekend with best regards, Hans Naphausen, Hasselt, Belgium. I appreciate that, Hans, and your input. The thing with Israel and Hamas, that's a tough situation to fix. You have to understand this problem has been going on since 19 fucking 48. It's never been resolved. No president has been able to resolve it. And these wars have been going on for decades. And don't forget, you're worried about the alleged genocide. I won't even say alleged, definitely genocide with Benjamin Netanyahu behind it going on in Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. That is horrific. That is atrocious. I want to see it stopped. But you fail to mention all the other genocides going on around the world. Why is that one most important? There is genocide going on all across the country, all across the world. There's a lot that needs to be fixed. And as president of the United States, there's only so much he could do. If it was going on here in the United States, he could shut it down tomorrow. But he's got limitations dealing with Israel, at least at this point. He can put pressure on them, and he's trying to do that. I'm not saying that Joe Biden couldn't do more or shouldn't do more, but to hang that around his neck is fucking ridiculous. Yes, I know we're giving him weapons and artillery and that sort of thing, but that's part and parcel to being an ally. You have to understand they're fighting against Hamas. Hamas is supported by Iran, who is supported by Russia. Hamas attacked Israel. They have to respond. Now, the fact that Israel doesn't care what happens to the people in Gaza troubles me about Israel. We're talking about different mentalities in this part of the world. And again, this has been going on for fucking decades. If it could be fixed, it would have been fixed 40 years ago, but it hasn't. And Joe Biden's not going to be able to fix it. A lot of people thought they might. Remember when Carter had that signing with Begin and Sadat? Oh boy, we fixed things. And then shortly after that, Anwar Sadat gets fucking assassinated. You can't fix it. It's really up to Israel and the Palestinians to fix it. And there lies the problem. We can't bring them together to get them to do fucking anything. And we only have so much power. All right, this next one, I think it's the last one. Well, maybe not. This comes from Boris. Rational Boomer, I heard you say many times that Elvin Bragg's win percentage is 98%. Today, I decided to look it up on Google, and the result was 51% on serious felony cases, down from 68% just 5 years ago. I'm sure that these things are more complicated than Google gave me. Can you tell me where you found the 98% answer and how that it can be so far off from my result? Thank you for your response and your patience with me. No doubt, best I can remember, it's something that uh, was it Andrew Weissman or Glenn, the lawyer, who said it. I got it from their words. Now, Boris, I did what you did. I Googled this question. And the only thing I will say, Boris, be careful where you get your information, because I know where you got this information. It's almost word for word. You got it from the New York Post. Do not get information from the New York Post. That's owned by Rupert Murdoch, and it's a fucking tabloid. I'm not saying what they're saying is wrong. I don't know. And Boris is one of these people that loves to try to needle me a little bit and try to get me into an argument, and you're not going to do that today. I got it from Glenn and or Andrew Weissman, and I heard it from their voices. I trust them. They are a good source, and I believe they know what they're talking about. Now, could it be wrong? It could be wrong, but that's not the point. The point is that Donald Trump is on trial. In the first witnesses, there was enough evidence revealed there to convict him. He is going to be convicted of multiple felonies, if not all 34 felonies. And we'll find out soon enough in the next couple of months. But Boris, I'm just going to tell you, Google's great, but it depends on where Google brings you. And if they bring you to the New York Post, take that with a fucking grain of salt, for Christ's sake. All right. Next one comes from Gary from Massachusetts. Hey, Mike, I just watched the Howard Stern episode with Joe Biden. Say what you want about our president, but the guy is an intelligent, compassionate man. The right will make you think he's stumbling in the dark, but at this point in our country's history, we desperately need someone like Joe Biden at the helm. You had a great week of content on your show, and I appreciate you immensely. Your friend Gary from Massachusetts. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is watch Joe, and the whole concept that he stumbles and can't finish a sentence is absolute bullshit. You could say the same thing about Donald Trump, and it would be fucking true. And we can pull up video and audio of him doing just that. But isn't that the way of Republicans, the projection? Whatever they complain about, whatever they accuse people of, they themselves are doing it. You have the audacity to suggest that Joe Biden can't finish a sentence. Well, then you clearly haven't listened to Donald Trump, because that motherfucker can't complete a sentence. And even if he does, the fucking sentence is so convoluted, you don't know what the fuck he said. So, yeah, I agree with you, Gary. Thank you. Now, this is an interesting story. And the reason I bring it up is because it's kind of in line with my thought process. After the Supreme Court arguments regarding Donald Trump's immunity, you've got some media people out there and other people talking and saying, oh my God, they're going to give him immunity. And I'm telling you, they're not going to give him immunity. And I found this article, and it's really in support of what I'm saying, and it makes sense. So I think you need to hear it. Now, a lot of legal experts appeared worried after the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the immunity case with Donald Trump. Um, but a former FBI agent said on Saturday, there's no way the right wing justices are going to buy all of what the former president is selling. It's just not going to happen. This is former FBI Special Agent Asha Rangappa. She weighed in on the Supreme Court hearing, pointing out the novelty of Trump's absolute presidential immunity argument that would see an ex president avoid any charges as long as they weren't convicted at an impeachment trial, which the concept is absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, they go on to say, I don't know who needs to hear this, but the requirement that POTUS needs to be impeached and convicted before being prosecuted is something literally no one ever argued until Trump. This is what she said on social media. Apart from the fact that this claim grossly misreads the impeachment clause, the conservative justices won't bite because it undercuts the very theory of almost unlimited presidential power to which they subscribe. She continued, to wit, it would place POTUS's power to enforce the laws against former presidents at the mercy of Congress. Not going to happen, and none of them explored this in oral argument. It was too dumb, even for them, I guess. And she continued, to wit, it would place POTUS power to enforce laws against former presidents at the mercy of Congress. I needed to repeat that because that's exactly right. They're not going to do it. No matter what they said, no matter what it may have sounded like, they are not going to give him immunity. The idea that they might send it back to the lower court, that doesn't make sense either. As I've said before, they've got big egos in this group. They want their stamp on it. They want their names attached to it. And if they do send it back to the lower court, well, then Donald Trump is fucked because Judge Chutkan can run the whole case before the case even started, bring out all the evidence and all the witnesses and run that through the fucking press before the trial even starts. So, yeah, that's not going to happen. They might give him the time he needs or the delay he thinks he wants, but that delay, as I've said, is not going to work in his benefit when he loses the election. Because then he's out there like an island unto himself with no protection, and he's got 3 criminal trials coming to take his ass down. Now, here's another interesting perspective, something I've been talking about too, about Donald Trump being forced to be in court for the hush money trial. And some people, some inner circle people are saying it's subjecting him to something he's not accustomed to having to deal with, and it's getting to him. That came out in the Wall Street Journal. After 2 weeks of having to sit in the Manhattan courtroom where he's facing 34 felony charges related to Stormy Daniels' hush money case, the Journal's Corrine Ramey wrote that the restrictions on his movements in the courthouse, being unable to speak when he wants to, and even what he is allowed to drink while in the courtroom are making him increasingly gloomy. And you can see it on his face. You can hear it in his voice. More to the point, Donald Trump's longtime friend, John Katzimatidis, told the Journal he's miserable. I love that for him. There is no more horrible thing than just having to sit and be quiet. According to Ramey's report, Donald Trump, alleged billionaire accustomed to jet setting between adoring campaign rallies and his Florida estate, has spent 2 weeks with as many as 6 to go sitting unhappily at the defense table in a city where he built his real estate empire and his 2016 White House campaign. As for those small indignities being visited upon the former president, she notes he's freezing, he says, due to the building's finicky heating system. In court, he can't eat or drink anything but water, robbing him of multiple Diet Cokes he consumes in a typical day. He can use the bathroom only when the judge declares a break in proceedings. That doesn't harm Donald Trump, though. He's got a diaper on. He can go to the bathroom anytime he wants. A panel of 18 New Yorkers, 12 jurors, and 6 alternates have front row seats to his every yawn, catnap, and mutter. Yeah, this isn't playing very well for Donald Trump. Now, the journal's Ramey added to reports that the 77-year-old Trump is having trouble staying awake throughout the proceedings. Excuse me, writing he often looks just plain bored. His eyes closed for extended periods and his head starts to nod. He tilts his head back and crosses his arms. Even the slightest assertion of autonomy can provoke a rebuke from the judge. Add to that, she notes Trump has lost control of his daily calendar, writing what presiding judge Juan Marchand has been less than accommodating when the former president has tried to get extra days off, as he has successfully done in other criminal trials to delay the proceedings. Donald Trump is being controlled, and this is absolute torture for somebody who is a control freak, which is what he is. All of his life, he's been allowed to do whatever the fuck he wants, whenever the fuck he wants, and now he can't do shit. If you don't think that's getting to him, you're mistaken. Now, it's interesting. He's in New York. I think he's staying in Trump Tower. But it's interesting. Trump Tower is starting to, I won't say deteriorate, but some shit's going on. A recent visit to Trump Tower, where former President Donald Trump set up camp while attending his trial in the Manhattan district, revealed empty public spaces, lagging construction, and a massive waterfall the Trump organization is proud of, turned off and silent. In a collection of startling photos taken by the Daily Beast Nell Scoville, accompanied by some of her wry commentary, at least the first two stories of the so-called Trump crown jewel appear mostly empty, with shuttered retail shops undergoing construction, a currency exchange booth looking abandoned, and a Trump Tower gift shop cluttered with Trump 2020 campaign posters. Now, as Scoville wrote and documented with her photos, with the owner and former president back in residence, you might think they'd try to spruce up the abutting commercial and retail space. You'd be wrong. Nobody wants to be in there. There's no benefit to being in Trump Tower anymore. Now, noting the massive lobby waterfall promoted by the Trump organization as one of the most notable features of Trump Tower, is the breathtaking 60-foot waterfall embellishing the eastern wall of the building. Scoville reported today it was notable that there's no water in the waterfall, and waterfall without water, just a fucking wall. She also reported the Trump Cafe is currently under construction, signage pleading pardon our appearance, reporting it most likely open the second week of May, said an elderly security guard. Then he wiggled his hand in a give or take gesture, suggesting not even he believes that will happen. Now, both public terraces appear to be permanently closed to the public. The lack of public outdoor spaces may be in violation of a deal with the city, which traded additional square footage for these gardens. In the smaller exterior space, what's visible through the window looks sparse and untended, she wrote before adding the large glass doors, which opened up to a second grander terrace, are now mirrored, overlooking, and locked. On a final note, Scoville photographed a forlorn black trash receptacle sitting among the planters, polished brass and glass, with only a few Trump Tower visitors to be seen. So Trump Tower is becoming a ghost town, and why not? Nobody wants to be associated with Donald Trump at this fucking point. I mention this story only because I take such great joy in Donald Trump's failure. And this is representative of what's going to happen to Donald Trump. All the um, lavish properties he has are going to go into disrepair or get sold, or he'll lose in foreclosure. Money is tight for Donald Trump. He's got lawyers to pay. He's got a campaign to run. And every bit of free money is going to be going into that. And that means his properties are not going to be maintained. All right, the last thing I wanted to bring up is yet more trouble for the Republicans. Representative Bill Posey, a Republican in Florida, announced Friday that he is retiring at the end of this year, adding to a wave of congressional retirements. He said, "It's been the greatest honor of Katie's in my life to represent you in Congress. And polls suggest that because of your support, I could remain in the job forever, and we are looking forward to another spirited campaign for a final term in office. However, earlier this week, circumstances beyond my control now require me to suspect my reelection campaign. Posey, 76, has represented Florida's 8th congressional district since 2008. Remember, he's on 2-year terms. That's a lot of time for being a rep. The Florida lawmaker said he looks forward to helping former president get reelected. Yeah, good luck with that, motherfucker. And said his goal was to see State Senate President Mike Herodopoulos replace him in the House. Yeah, good luck on that, too. For many years, Mike has served as my Congressional Finance Committee chairman while I have mentored him to replace me. Mike was and remains my first choice to represent you, me, and our district in Congress. But you have to wonder if Posey not only wants to be separated from the shit show that is the Republican Party, that maybe he's thinking his chances are slim. You know, you've got some 40 people in the Republican Party that are retiring. And because of that, you have to believe that some of those districts are at risk to the Republicans. If they thought they were going to win for sure, they'd stay in office. They'd try to tough it out till after the 24 election, but they're not. Some people think it's because they're frustrated or upset with the Republican Party, and that might be for some of them. But generally, when somebody decides not to run, it's because they know they're going to lose. And if they know they're going to lose, it would suggest that maybe the Democrats are going to win. Because I'll tell you this, when it comes to the House of Representatives, in the upcoming election, they're going to lose a lot of seats. The Democrats are maybe going to have a majority with as many as 30 or 40 seats. It's going to get crazy in the House, and the Republicans aren't going to be able to do jack shit. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and I'll be sure to tell you all about the party. It's going to be a fucking wild one with that 4-year-old. But anyway, have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.